Hello ladies and gentlemen, today I will show you how to speedrun Ratatouille any percent. This video will include the most advanced strats and also more beginner friendly strats for newcomers. If you are a beginner, I will suggest that you go for all beginner strats for your first run to get a time that you can compare against and later try to implement some of the harder strats. I made a beginner run in a separate video to make it easier to follow once you start running. If you have not installed and set up the game yet, you should watch my other tutorial regarding that first. Link in the description. Before you start, you need to decide if you want to play with controller or keyboard and mouse. The top players use mostly keyboard and mouse, but that should not discourage you from using controller if you're planning to do so. The advantage from using keyboard and mouse is that you will get better camera management, especially when you need to turn the camera fast in some situations. I personally use keyboard and mouse, so that is what I will base my tips around when talking about movement and mechanics. You can use whatever key bindings you want, but here is mine for reference. Before the run, I want to mention a couple of things before we start. First off, we have Remy's abilities. I use WASD for walking, Shift for sprinting and Space for jumping. By default, the camera is controlled by your mouse, but you can also bind your keys to steer the camera if you want. Then we have the attack/grab button, which I have on E and left click as a secondary. This is used to attack enemies and grab onto nets and objects. Some objects, like the cans for example, can be picked up and dropped by the same input. But there is certain objects that you can attack enemies with, and in order to drop those you need to press the drop button instead. Moving on to some other tips is that you can start your jump mid-air to extend it even further, which we will utilize during the run, but also for a skip later that saves you a lot of time. When you start sprinting with Remy, you will notice that you can bonk almost everywhere in the game, so something that you want to learn is to know when to release shift to avoid bonking. And you want to sprint as much as you can, since running is twice as fast as walking. When you're turning with Remy, a good thing to know is that if you're running one way and want to start running the opposite direction, if you hold sprint while switching direction, he will start doing this cartoonish turn, which loses a little bit of time. So before you start running the other way, you want to release all your buttons, and when Remy has stopped, you can start running in the other direction. In this game we limit our FPS between 60 to 100, and I would advise that you pick 80. I will go over why later in the video. It's also worth mentioning that movement is more important than going for all skips. You can get a good time with only beginner strats and good movement. You can of course try to learn all the strats right away if you want, but some tricks will be easier for you to learn once you get a feel for the movement and game physics. The any percent category consists of 10 segments, and the first one is called Somewhere in France. This is the longest segment in the run and can be tricky to get a good time on. But this is the part where the developers wanted to learn how to play the game, which you will notice since there's a lot of annoying text boxes. With that being said, let's head over and start the run. Okay, in this mission you're supposed to collect all of the apple cores and follow Emile. I will let the run play and pause when I need to add something. So here's the first obstacle, and this first text box that you see now is unskippable, but there is two more that you can skip. The first text box is at the last pot in this sequence, so here we do an extended jump to the right to avoid the trigger. This one is easy, but the second text box is definitely harder, and the trigger is at the start at this spot. The timing is really precise for the double jump, so I wouldn't care about this text box if you're a beginner, cause it only saves around 1 to 2 seconds for each pot. If you have trouble with the net, you can just climb normally, but you want to start out with 3 double jumps, meanwhile moving to the right. When you're at the highest point, you want to jump and turn the camera and use your double jump when you can grab the lowest apple core and then jump up. If you have trouble with jumping and grabbing fast, I would advise you to bind 2 buttons to your interact key. I attached my interact key to E and left click. I do this because the interaction with nets can be weird, so if you look at my input display you can see that I press both inputs to make sure that Remy grabs the net. Now we're entering the first save stage, and there is a way to skip the saves in the game, also referred to as the read-only trick. Initially, the game forces you to save, which adds a lot of time, and of course we don't want that, so if you change some settings in the game files, you can hinder the game from saving, which means that you can skip the saves a lot faster. Here's a side-by-side comparison of a normal save and when you skip the save. I explain how to do it in a separate video, so check the description for that. On the poles, just spam space and E to go faster, and make sure to extend your jump to skip the first one. The bed jump is a bit tricky and actually harder on 60 FPS compared to 80. I will recommend that you play on 80 since that is what most people play with, including myself. The thing to note is to make sure you jump straight. If you miss the jump when running, you can stand below it and jump, or just use the can. One thing that is good to mention is that when you enter these narrow spaces or stand under something, the camera won't allow you to turn around fully. That is because the game has a real cameraman following Remy everywhere he goes. So if you stand next to a wall, you can't actually do a 360, so keep this in mind when you're in between objects, narrow areas, or going through rat holes. Here you want to grab onto the net and get the apple on the other side of the net. And you want to jump from the highest point of the house, grab the apple and die from fall damage. Your respawn will be closer to the last apple and the loads from the death cutscene will be removed and make you save time. Remember that if you play on console, this will not make you save time because currently we don't have a load remover for the other versions. The net can be tricky in the beginning, so if you want you can go for a safer version or the intended way instead. When you're on a ball, you can spam sprint to go faster. When you are at the gutter, I use this line as guidance when to jump, and at the peak of your jump, press E to attach to the line. If this is difficult for you, you can just go directly on the line instead. A small tip to skip the books as fast as possible is to bind your valid key to space or something easy, and when the book is appearing you want to hover your cursor around here and spam space. If you're playing with controller, you can place the cursor at this spot before you start the run, and when the book appears the mouse should already be in place and just spam your valid key to skip it. And take note that the cursor is bigger than it seems, so you can miss it pretty easily.
Dude, what the fuck?
Here you want to run in a straight line until you get to the last couple of apples. Then you want to tap left and right or steer with the mouse. When you get close to the chicken, she will start to aggro and you want to be slightly more to the left, then take a hit and collect the rest of the apples. It is possible to collect all of the apples without getting hit by the chicken, but currently it's something that nobody goes for. But cool that it's possible. The chickens is the first RNG in the run. You can save time if the chickens are closer to each other, but thankfully it's not a run killer. This is also a big reason why I have my attack button on E and left click, since it's much easier to paddle with your mouse click. Okay, so now the first segment is complete and we're heading off to the river. River is the second segment in the game, and even though it's an auto-scroller, you can pretty easily lose a couple of seconds if you're not paying attention. When it comes to the routing, it does not make any sense, but this route is the fastest. And regarding falling logs, you want to single jump over them, but double jumping does not lose much time. On the slides, you want to do a fast double jump when you enter. Okay, this section is a little bit weird. After these 3 falling logs there will be a slide which can make you lose speed, so I will just let the video play and recap afterwards. Okay, so what actually happened there? Maybe you saw that Remy bonked directly when he landed on the book. That will happen very often. Currently there is no explanation for why that happens, and therefore this method has a 100% success rate, but the ultimate goal is to get a fast paddle. A fast paddle is when Remy continues to paddle after this particular slide. Most of the time he will bonk when landing on a book, but you can increase the likelihood that you will get a fast paddle depending on how you enter this slide. And there are 3 ways you can approach this slide from. The easiest and most beginner-friendly way is to wait until you reach the slide and then single jump over it. However, you will most likely bonk when you land on a book and your speed will slow down. But if you're just starting out, this is what I would recommend. Then we have a setup which is more consistent for fast paddle, and you will also maintain more speed compared to the easy version. You want to double jump and land on the left side of the slide and then wiggle to build up speed and finish at the right side. For some reason that seems to be more consistent for a fast paddle than finishing at the left side of the slide. The reason why you want to jump on the left side of the slide is because of an invincible wall that is located here when you jump from a distance. The wall disappears when you're closer to the slide as in the easy version. Then we have the hard setup, which is the most risky, because if you jump too early you will either hit the invincible wall, bonk on the slide, or worst case scenario, fall in the river. But with the right timing you can maintain your speed through the slide, although this method is not as consistent for getting a fast paddle. Now we are finished with the river and heading over to Paris Streets. Paris Streets is the 3rd segment of the speedrun and is one of the most annoying. There is no big skips here, just very precise jumps and movements in a narrow area. Particularly in here, since it's very easy to bonk on everything. On this slippery stuff you just want to touch it and right away press double jump. When you jump on the catapult you only need to be over it and spam your interact key and Remo will automatically attach to it. When you go through rat holes you want to lower the camera when you enter, cause otherwise the camera will clip weird. Here you can bonk pretty much everywhere, and it also depends on what FPS you're playing on. Higher FPS increases the bonks. On this copper pipe I like to turn the camera to the right, cause sometimes Remy will fall down from it and there is more bonks on the floor compared to the pipe. These leaking water pipes go on a cycle as soon as you enter the room, and if you play perfectly to this point you may have to slow down here or jump over them to not get hit. But I like to slow down on purpose so I can walk along the pipe like this. And now we're done with Paris streets and heading over to the kitchen. The soup is pretty self-explanatory. If you spam all the buttons at the start, you can get a fast ingredient if you're lucky, since you won't lose any progress if you press wrong at the start. But in this clip I did not get it. Now it's time for DKE, that stands for Deserted Kitchen Early and skips a big part of the game and is the only skip that is necessary to do if you are a beginner. This is also the difference between any percent and the other categories like NLE for example. Before you even attempt this, you need to limit your FPS to 80 and this is also required to submit a run. If you're running NLE you want to continue forward, but since we're playing any percent we go left. It's not as hard as it looks. You want to double jump between the legs of the table and then Remy will get stuck between two objects and the game then pulls him away from them, making Remy in a state where he isn't in the air or the floor, which is the reason he gets the extra jump to reach the table. What you want to do is to walk into the wall and double jump, and when you jump mid-air I switch from holding forward to turning left and holding down. And when Remy clips upwards a little bit and gets stuck, you want to start spamming jump. It's not that precise, this is just my setup and what I find most consistent. You can turn to almost any direction mid-air except for right, cause I feel it's more likely that you will clip out instead if you do that. You also want to space out the timing between your first and second jump. Try to match the one in the video and you should get it. Notice that I also turn the camera here to get a better angle when I clip through. If you hold the camera still once he gets through the table, the camera can act weird sometimes. And if you're planning to run with controller, here is an input display for that. Then just go through the window to the next mission, the deserted kitchen. Now we're entering a stage where a lot of tricks is being made and the goal is to make the plates fall on the floor. And first we want to avoid Skinner by going on the left side of him, and be careful when you go between the white powder, cause you can get stuck on that and it's really annoying. Also make sure to hug the wall to avoid getting seen by Skinner. If you play on lower FPS you can get up on the plates easy, but if you play on higher you will need to jump on them in the corner like this. And jumping from the plates to the table can be tricky, but you want to extend your jump that I told you about earlier in the video. Important that you jump when you're not standing on the plates, but if it's hard you can jump directly on the trash can instead. When you're up here you want to reach the plates without getting hit by the crab, and you want to avoid being above the table when you're not jumping on the honey. So you don't want to jump in a straight line, cause then the crab will most likely hit you and you will fall down. This is the movement that you want to replicate. When you are at the plates, just press the action button and they will fall down. But a small time save that you can do is to hold the action button when you run past the plates. Climb on the towel, and when you're up here you want to do the same thing as before. Now we are going to do a trick called door frame, which is one of the most difficult skips in the game, cause if you miss the timing you will fall down from the door and die. Definitely go for the beginner route here if you're just starting out. I will show you door frame first and I will play the clip and recap afterwards. So, there was a lot of things happening in a short amount of time, but I will go over it bit by bit. The first thing that you want to do is to give the chili bottle to the crab. If you're doing beginner route, you're going to do that later in the run. Then you want to extend your jump so you land on the handle. The reason for that is when you jump off the trash can, normally you will not reach the cable, but if you jump from the handle you will get a little bit of extra height so you can reach the cable faster. When Remy is attached to the cable, you will notice that the movement is a little bit weird. Depending on what camera angle you view Remy from, different keys needs to be pressed. For example, here where I view Remy from the side, I need to press A or D to go up and down. As you can see, when I turn the camera to the side, Remy does not move when I press A or D from a different direction. When I have this angle, you can see that Remy moves up and down when I press W and S. So to summarize, the camera can take a while to get used to. When you are at the top of the cable, you want to fully turn the camera to the left and you want to jump where the cable starts to turn. Then I press right and forward and double jump to reach the door. When you land on the door, I like to jump forward to line myself up with the angle you want to jump from. It's not really that precise where you are standing, but you want to be around here. And you want to line up so Remy hits his head on the highest part of the frame, since it's impossible to perform it if you aim at the red part. When you're ready, you want to walk off the door and jump mid-air so Remy hits his head on the frame and jump again to reach the trampoline. Then you just want to jump on the trampoline, use the swings and start the vacuum cleaner to end the mission. It's not a frame perfect trick, but getting the timing correct can be tricky at first. Be patient with this trick, it can take many attempts to even get it once. In the beginning, I would advise you to try to jump from this angle, because it's easier to see where you're supposed to jump. However, you can't really see where the trampoline is, so try to only use this to learn the timing. But of course we have the intended way as well, the beginner route, which I will show you now. When you have pushed off the second plate, you want to head right and grab the chili bottle. Give it to the crab and he will explode. Then you want to grab the can and make sure to hug the wall here so the other crab doesn't take the can from you. Now we're entering the shrimps and the goal is to make them jump into the rat traps, and this is also the part where it's much more consistent to play on 80 compared to 60. I will explain why in a second, but as usual I will play the whole segment and recap afterwards. So that's the way you want to do it. When you have talked to the rat, you want to head left, and I go on the left side of the shrimp here, but I know some runners go right, but it does not really matter. Then you just want to jump over this and the shrimp will always jump into the trap. And here you want to be more to the left, because this shrimp over here will see you when you run past it, and you don't want to be too close, because then he will jump down from the pot, and that will mess up the routing later. It's not only this shrimp that can jump out randomly, it implies on every shrimp when you're playing on 60, but most of the time this one is the imposter. Okay, so now I will explain the differences between 60 and 80 FPS when you're doing the shrimps. And when you start the segment, you walk over here, and if you're too much to the right here, this shrimp will notice you and sometimes he will jump down from the pot. And this occurs more often on 60 FPS compared to 80. And then when you continue walking this way and you get up on the table and get rid of the trap, and then you come back around here, then you want this shrimp to kill this and this shrimp to kill this. But the issue is when you're standing here waiting for the shrimp to jump towards you, if he jumped out earlier when you were back here, he will be behind the pot and just jump forever, and you will lose a bunch of time, and it's really annoying. And there is a backup for this. You can just wait until this shrimp respawns and kill the trap with this shrimp instead. But yeah, to avoid this, play on 80 and try to be more on the left side over here, and you should get the route more consistently.
Are you serious now? Dude, I just got skamazed so hard. Are you fucking serious?
So to avoid that, I like to follow the edges of the tiles here and just stop for a little bit, and the second shrimp should jump into the trap. Here I just line myself up with the edge of the trap and I make sure that the shrimp is facing Remy. And remember that if you went for a beginner route earlier, you will have to give the chiller bottle to the crab here. But since I went for door frame in this clip, I can just grab the spoon and continue. A tip that is good to know is that you want to make eye contact with the shrimp as soon as you can, because then they will start to jump towards you earlier. You can see in this clip when I don't look at it and later turn the camera towards it, you can see that the shrimp jumps up, and that actually resets the shrimp from jumping out. So when you're waiting for the shrimp to jump towards you, stand still and don't move the camera, and make sure that the shrimp is visible on the screen. And if you are a beginner, it's better to be safe than sorry and wait a little bit longer to make sure that it actually jumps out from the pot. We also have a harder route which is called penis route. It saves around 5 to 7 seconds if done perfectly. This is very easy to mess up, so I would only advise going for this if you're top 5, or if you're behind and don't have any time save left, then you can YOLO it. So first off, jump over this as usual and the first shrimp will jump into the first trap. Here you actually want the shrimp to jump out from a pot unlike the normal route, so I try to sprint more to the right like this, and at the same time I want to make a fair bit of eye contact with the shrimp before I pass him. And now you're waiting for the shrimp to the left to jump into the trap you're standing next to, and the shrimp to the right to start jumping so he lines up for the next trap. And if you're standing too far away here, it's very likely that Remy will be out from this shrimp's vision, and it's very possible that the shrimp will stop before he goes to the correct position. So I stop at the top of this black tile, and you don't want to go too close to the mousetrap because their hitboxes are bigger than they seem. As soon as the traps gets destroyed, I sprint over here to line up for the next trap. Very close to not working here, ideally you want the shrimp to already be there when you line up for the trap. Since the shrimp was slow this time, I play it safe and walked for a little bit so the shrimp have time to stop and then start to aggro towards Remy's new position. Then I line up close to the trampoline and at the same time waiting for the shrimp to start jumping. And this timing is really important because it will affect what the shrimp will do next when you're on the table. When you're on the table, you want the shrimp to follow you without the shrimp stopping. The reason you want the shrimp to follow is so you can lure it into the trap when you go down from the table. If the shrimp stops when you're on the table, that means that you jump too early onto the trampoline. But that being said, you can still get the shrimp into the next trap if that happens. But you will lose time depending on how long the shrimp stops. That's why we tilt the camera so we can have vision over the shrimp so we know if the shrimp stops or not. You also don't want to jump too late, cause then the shrimp might aggro too fast and go in front of Remy, which messes up the lineup the shrimp will do when you go down from the table. And for the last two traps, just follow my movement and you should get those. Okay, now we're finished with the streams, and in the next segment we're supposed to find Gusteau's book, which is located in the office. You want to remove the sticky ball that is blocking the rat hole, and there is 3 ways you can do this. This is the hardest but saves the most time. I will play a part of the segment and recap afterwards.
Couldn't be simple, could it?
Okay, time for a recap. So the first thing that you want to do is to grab the chili bottle. Then we want to place it down on the floor where the box and the ramp meets. The reason for that is to make the crab grab it from you. And I drop it when Remy is on this line, and I make sure that Remy faces the spot where I want to put it down. When the crab grabs it, you want to jump over the box and steer him so he gets in between the crab and the plant thingy. And then we want to hit the crab so he releases the bottle so the explosion kills both of these. Then you want to talk to Celine that loads the trigger to the book and just go through the wall. But I will go over the first section more in depth before I continue. The crab's movement is dependent on where you stand with Remy, so for example, if the crab moves to the left, you have to move more to the left than him so he moves to the right. So you want to learn how to balance the crab so he gets into the right position. In this clip you can see that I almost failed this, but I was able to recover it. So this is something that you need to practice to get a feel for, and if you're having trouble with placing it down correctly, you could just hold the bottle, which also gives you more time to steer the crab before he stops. Common mistakes that can happen is that you stand too close to the box when you release the bottle, and then Remy will start to walk backwards. You also want to be careful not to go too far on the ramp, because then this crab will grab it instead. When you chase the crab into the right position, you want to release sprint a little bit before you press attack so you don't bonk into the crab. If the bottle only explodes this one, then you can use the spoon as a backup to pass through instead. And if you mess this up, you can exit and enter again and you will respawn at the last checkpoint. This is very good for practice and is also allowed in runs. If you have trouble with the strat, you can go for a safe strat that loses a little bit of time compared to the other strat. Then you just grab the bottle like normal and follow my movement here. Since you only get rid of the crab, you will have to go and get the spoon to pass by. So now when you're in here, you want to pass the spiders by jumping on the ball, and when you steer you want to avoid hitting the walls as much as possible, cause you can bounce off the walls and then it's very easy to fall in the holes. Killing the spiders isn't necessary for this strat unless you're doing the easy version, which I will show you later. When you have passed the spiders, you want to pass the spiky ball, and we can actually do that without the spoon. The reason for that is cause when the spiky ball goes into defense mode, the hitbox gets smaller temporarily, which we will utilize to pass through. And if you are a beginner, I would advise you to jump off the ball when you're right next to it. The reason for that is cause when you're on the ball, the spiky thing won't notice that Remy is nearby. Therefore, it won't go into defense mode until you jump down from the ball, which will give you more time for the setup to pass through. You can see in this clip when I jump off early, I trigger it as soon as I land on the ground, which I want in this case because it's faster, but it also gives me less time to pass before he attacks. You want to walk up to the left side of it, and you want to make sure that you touch it before you start sprinting, cause otherwise you might accidentally bonk on it instead. Then you just sprint and spam single jump and you should get through. Now it's time for a skip called paperclip that we use to reach the green furniture. It can be a little bit tricky to learn when you're new to the game, but once you get your light bulb moment, it's actually pretty easy and a lot more forgiving than door frame, for example. Here's a clip on how to do it. What you want to do is to stand below the paper that is sticking out from the box, and if you stand at a certain spot and single jump, you will notice that Remy clips through the paper and gets a little bit of extra height, and that is what we want to utilize to reach the furniture. And most important of all is that you keep your camera angle straight so you get the most distance. If you move your camera during this, you will turn Remy's direction as well, making you fall short. I prefer jumping with this camera angle and most top runners do, but I've also seen runners use this angle, so go for whatever works best for you. And when you have found the right spot, you want to single jump and right after hold forward and then double jump. You don't actually want to land on the paper and then jump, cause then you lose all of your momentum and height that you got from the clip in the first place. And if you remember what I said in the beginning of the video, is that you can actually start a double jump even a small bit after you have walked off the surface. That is exactly what we're doing here. You can see here in slow motion that Remy is not even on the paper when I start my jump. So you don't want to jump too early, cause then you will get the height but not enough momentum to reach it. And the longer you wait to jump, the more height you will lose. A perfect example of this is in my PB where I jumped too late, and if you look carefully you can see that Remy drops down a bit, which was the reason I cut short. As for everything in speedrunning, you need to find the sweet spot for it. The spacing between your jump is also important. If your first jump is timed correctly, but the spacing between your first and second jump is either too much or too little, that will also be a factor for why you fail it. But if you struggle with the strat, there is the intended way as well, which loses a lot more time compared to the other easier strats that I showed you before. So if you are a beginner, out of all of the major skips including DKE, paperclip, door frame and crab manip, you should of course start to learn DKE, cause that is the only skip you need to do in any percent. But after that I will learn paperclip, and the last two does not really matter. You can learn one or the other or both at the same time. Anyway, here is the beginner route that you can do instead of paperclip. Talk to Celine like normal and then just grab the spoon. Drop the spoon and jump on the ball, and this time we actually want to kill the majority of the spiders so you can walk past them. And it's possible to pass the spiders if you press attack when you're close to a spider. They can't actually attack you during the spinning animation. Then we go up here to get the can. And here you actually want to die intentionally, so you respawn close to the spoon. And now just go through the spiders, get rid of the spiky thing and place the can down below the furniture. Okay, so now when we're here I will begin to show you the easier and less risky route, and then I will go over the faster route. And here is the faster route. When you do this jump, you want to be over this pole when you're at the highest point of the jump and spam the interact key and you should get it. When you're on the bookshelf, the trigger to the end of the mission does actually extend over the edge, so we can just jump like this and complete the mission. Now we only have two segments left, and that is minigames and chase, so we want to get to the top of this table and start the minigames. This skip is called sink clip and is actually really easy. Just sprint towards the sink, and when you touch the slippery part on the floor, just hold the left and double jump and you should clip through. It's the slippery state that makes Remy clip through the sink, so you can't just jump through it without jumping off the slippery part. And you also don't need any speed for this. I've seen a lot of new runners go back when they miss it, which is not needed. You want to always press left a small bit before you start jumping, and you should get it every time. You don't want to jump and then hold left, cause then it's more likely that you will miss it. When you have made it to the top of the table, just walk left to trigger the next mission, Minigames. Here you want to flip the switches so it matches with the pattern above. and I use A and D to steer Remy and my left and right arrow keys to flip the switches. And now for everybody's favorite, salad. Here we want to pick the right ingredient for the recipe. And the goal is to pick 5 ingredients for each plate, and a trick that you can do every time you start a new plate is that you can spam the accept button to get the first ingredient faster. If you press wrong, you will only lose progress from the plate you're currently on, and you can't lose anything when the plate's empty. So always spam accept on the first ingredient on every plate to save time. And yes, this is completely RNG, but there is 7 different patterns that it can be, and here's a picture for that. And if you practice the patterns and remember them all, you can save lots of time. If you want to take a look at them yourself, go into the Ratatouille Speedrunning Discord and go over the Resources tab. Soup is pretty much the same as last time, except that you can't spam in the beginning to save time. And now for the icing on the cake, even more RNG. And there is 9 sequences of arrows that you need to do to complete the minigame. The first 3 sequences have 2 arrows, 4 to 6 have 3, and the last 3 have 4. But it's only the 6 first sequences that is RNG. And the difference between the best and the worst RNG is 6 seconds, but the best I've seen is 5 out of 6 good patterns. So in theory it's possible to get a 6 out of 6 good patterns, even though it has never happened in the community as far as I'm aware. The RNG is the distance between the arrows, and you want the arrows to be as close to each other as possible. Here is a picture on the differences, but this does not show all of the patterns, but just a general idea of how it works. And now for the final segment of the game, the chase. And here you can't move the camera, just run forward and try your best to avoid the obstacles. Since we limit our FPS, Remy does not take damage from the candles like he's supposed to do, so you can jump off them without bonking or taking damage, but you want to be careful for the soups and the red plates, especially the plates, cause your jump can get eaten when you jump over these. That can happen if you delay your spacing between your first and second jump by too much. So when you jump over these, you want to jump off the ground as late as possible without getting stuck in it, of course, and you want to do a fast double jump and not a delayed one. The chase can be tricky in the beginning when you haven't memorized the route, so if you want, you can walk during the whole chase without getting caught by Skinner. And now the speedrun is complete. If you played alongside the video, congrats on finishing your first run. If you want to do another run, I made a beginner run that is meant for completely beginners. I go for every single beginner strat, and this is meant to get you started right away without any practice. If you want to go straight into the game and learn all of the strats, good luck and let us know in the Discord if you need any help. Remember to limit your FPS before you do anything. It will be a lot easier for you. If you haven't installed the game yet, you can check out my setup tutorial for that to get started. And a special thanks to these lovely people from the Ratatouille community for helping me with the video. Thank you for watching the video, and bye bye.
How do you know? What do I always say? Anyone can cook.
The duck's burnt! You're cooking in a burnt pan, you fucking dick!